Let's see. Any kind of specific entry point you want to start with?
Yeah, actually, I mean, okay, so um I'm if we want to start with energy and f the feeling of energy, like last night being at this Irish wedding, I was able to be in the moment, connect with people, with friends, and then also using the skills from years of training, able to sit back and observe the energy, you know. And I know a lot of people can do that, but observing it from the point of what is the purpose of this gathering with people?
Mm,
And for me, as the years have gone on, I have a specific feeling that comes over me visually, sensory, and that I know that I'm going into that zone. I suppose fighter pilots call it the flow state. You know, this is quite a common thing, and it's just a joy to be able to do that in the moment. And I think that's partly I put that down to a lot of my training. Um, One of the things that I'm really, really enjoying is the growth of Qi Gong as a tool. It's growing very nicely here in Ireland.
that's
Um,
great to hear, bro.
yeah. I tell you how amazing it was. So week or so ago, we were doing a tribal rite of passage for my son. And we visited a place called Drombeg Circle. You can Google it, Drombeg, Drombeg. It's a small, humble stone circle, but probably one of the most important
Ooh.
findings. And we did a ceremony with my son, watching the sun come up, pass onto the stone circle, watching the moon settle. And that same morning, we went down to the beach and he was put through his paces by a friend of mine who trained in Shaolin Kung Fu. So my son was put through it. And out of the blue, I was talking to another colleague of mine, and this lady walked onto the beach. And this is something I would never have seen living here 30 years ago. She just stood by the waves and started doing turning, Qigong style turning. So turning her waist left and right, letting the arms flow sweet, flow. And a friend of mine who I train in Qigong, he turned and he looked at me and he went, "That's pretty nice to see, isn't it?" And I said, "What are the chances?" You know, that's how much Qigong has grown in Ireland. Normally, people would go onto the beach, maybe dip in the water, maybe, I don't know, throw a ball for a dog, or, maybe do some yoga even. But then to see people ground themselves, get into the ground and start turning. So it's just wonderful to see that that's kind of becoming the normal, you know. And of course, then you see my son coming down onto the beach, doing his Shaolin deep stances and, doing push-ups and running and punching and doing a type of hard Qigong training. He's only 17. So to me, it's amazing. It's taken like 30 years of living here to see that just become normal. Um, a friend of mine in Dublin has now, I think, 30 or 40 people that come to him every week to do Qigong out of just suddenly exploded, you know.
Wow.
Um, Now we're nowhere near the numbers for yoga or Pilates, but I think Qigong is going to take a little while longer, just a little while longer,
Yep.
partly because of the way it's been transmitted.
Yep. I agree.
So yoga would have been transmitted predominantly, as you know, by bilingual people to the Western culture, and it just, I suppose, the Western culture ran with it, and it was made popular through, I suppose, changing circumstances, changing in the way people were living their lives, how they were eating, how they were sleeping. And And when people ask me what is the difference, what I've learned, and I'm not saying this is the truth, I'm saying this is the truth for me, is yoga is a discipline that helps you become ready to master then spirituality. So being able to sit in silence for a long period of time, being able to be fit and strong enough to sit in meditation for long periods of time. And the act of doing yoga or communing with that energy of unity is just the preparation, is the groundwork, is the foundations for ultimately meditation and then, going into those other realms. I find for me at the moment, Qigong is offering a gateway to health through awareness of self and energy outside of the body and energy then ultimately inside the body. So the word Qigong, as you know, is relatively modern. It's a word that's not, it's a very umbrella term. It's like saying yoga, right? Yoga
Mhm,
covers
mhm,
so many
mhm,
meanings, so many branches. So I know we've had this conversation before, but the clarity over, we use Qigong as a generic term, okay?
mhm,
So it's like saying, for example, China Universe Qigong, or maybe we're doing a type of stretching, opening the joints of the body. Quite a famous set of exercises called Ba Duan Jin, and this is 8 pieces of brocade, very, very famous in the Qigong circles. And that's a form of Qigong, but really it's not really a Qigong, it's just we put it in that category. And I think using that word has helped spread it.
mhm,
Is it the same as Tai Chi? I don't think so. I mean, you could argue that Tai Chi Chuan is a form of moving Qigong, but actually Tai Chi Chuan was a martial art. It was primarily a martial art, and those that achieve a very, very great depth in it will tell you that it becomes a vehicle for spirituality
mhm,
because
mhm,
that depth of awareness in the body helps you ascend. Um, for me at the moment, I'm concentrating on Nei Gong again. So Nei Gong, to differentiate for the listeners, Chi, energy, prana, right? Mana, whatever you want to call it, life force energy, mastery. That's what Qigong means. But the Gong section carries a lot more meaning. It means skill, effort, mastery, which is a combination of practice, effort, and consistency over time. That gives you the Gong. So Gong Fu, the word Gong Fu is actually means great skill. It doesn't mean martial arts or fighting. It's just something that we've adopted in the West. Nei Gong means Nei is like internal cultivation. It's from Nei Dan, which means internal work. And then Gong is internal skill. So you'll see Nei Gong in a lot of things, um, not just in breath work, movement, stance work. It also is applied in the martial realms for some people to be able to defend themselves using a power that we would probably liken to using fascia rather than using muscular power, so
mhm,
using the body as one unit, as an example. Um, Fortunate enough to be delving into that a lot more. And then more recently, learning a style of martial art called Wuji Chuan. Wuji is supreme or emptiness, primordial emptiness. It's a state that you can go from zero in any direction. And I suppose the Quan bit or the Chuan bit is this idea of it has an element of martial meaning to it. So it can mean fist, but it's a lot more than that. And that's an interesting system,
mhm,
very, very flowing, very
mhm,
soft. I think people, when they see me do it, they mistake it for Tai Chi,
Mm,
but it's a very, very different animal. And
mm,
it's spiritual. I call it spiritual kung fu. It's a very strange, for me, a very unusual feeling to it.
mm,
And it's based on sacred geometry that exists internally and externally from the body. And it's connecting that geometry, those shapes within the body. And those
mm,
shapes have spiritual significance to energy cultivation.
mm,
And that all sounds a lot of woo-woo until you actually experience being thrown or pushed or punched from its power, and you're like, huh,
mhm,
that's different.
mm,
Um, and then for me, then this year, I've been writing a children's book about Nei Gong. We're nearly, I just had the first 8 illustrations finished by actually a client of mine, a young client. So,
mm,
and it's the story of a monkey and an eagle interacting together.
mm,
And the monkey is the student and the eagle is the teacher. And if you remember the 8-step Nei Gong that I showed you nearly, I don't know, 6 or 7, maybe 7 years ago, in Tofino, that has it's the story of the development of that style
mm.
of Nei Gong, which
Wow.
is predominantly stance work,
Yep.
but each stance is a sacred shape.
Mhm,
It allows you to connect with a different energy within the body.
mhm,
Um, in terms of clinical work, I've been teaching Qi Gong, Nei Gong to patients to help them recover quicker because exercise rehab is phenomenal, but sometimes they're in a position where they can't commit to doing a certain level of physicality because the injury is maybe so severe, or maybe it needs something outside of doing functional movements. So the Qigong, Neigong exercises and movement helps bring them into that realm of healing, using their cultivating their own energy.
mm.
And this year I have a guy, I've been teaching him for 15 years.
Wow.
And like he comes every week. And the amount of things that have happened to him that he's recovered from so rapidly is unbelievable. He's 78 this year, this guy. And he just doesn't look it. I said, if he keeps going, uh, he's going to reverse aging. And he's just amazing. This is a guy that could not walk
Mm,
maybe 5, 10 minutes walk, and then he'd be in severe pain. I mean, so dysfunctional. His pelvis, hips, the sacroiliac joint, the tailbone, just constant pain.
mm,
Now, a lot of it was mental, emotional from the loss of his daughter, but there was a lot of other stuff going on there from years of standing as a teacher
mm,
and a combination of physical work with him and the Neigong. And I'm going to say maybe only a couple of years into his training, we had a huge, it was like a protest here in Ireland, all nationally against a particular type of taxation that was coming in. And he walked 5 hours on these marches through the streets of Dublin, 5 hours. This is a guy that couldn't cross the road to get the newspaper. So, and he put it completely down to the training. Um,
mm,
so I've been still working with this guy and teaching him what I'm learning. So we're training together.
mm,
Um, and anything else, yeah. And obviously more recently going back to teaching online with Chi Life Academy. And I decided I would do the China Universe Qigong because it's the only system that I've like purely inherited, as in this is the system, learn it, go away and use it, rather than learning it from a third party.
mm,
And it's a very basic system, very beautiful. It's a form. Now extra things come with it, but it's purely designed for healing. It's 100% designed to heal the human body in whatever capacity is possible.
mm.
because it's just harmonizing yin and yang. And it mimics, some of the movements mimic or supposedly mimic a crane flying
Mm.
or standing on a lily pad. And then parts of the form mimic, I believe, has Buddhist, though it's based on Taoism, has a Buddhist influence in that the form is called the lotus flower opens. Um, and this Qi Gong, Nei Gong, whatever you want to call it, is probably about 1,000 years old. Um, so it was developed, if you like, to help people increase their capacity for enlightenment. So there's four aspects to it, which is treatment of the self, so primarily, sorry, rehabilitation of the self, then treatment, then growth of wisdom, knowledge, uh, and then lastly, harmonization of the whole system. So it's broken into four aspects. Now, the original form was 2.5 hours to do. And my teacher quickly realized that was not going to be possible in China, in busy China. He learned this form, I think, in the 70s. He'd already done about 20 years of training at that point, but he decided, he said to his teacher, look, China's getting faster and bigger and busier, and to get people to meet him at the park for 2.5 hours training every day just, wasn't going to cut it. But his teacher said, look, you'll figure it out, you'll work it out. And a few years later, with the help of a very famous Chinese scientist who worked for the equivalent of NASA, if you like, they did a lot of physical quantum mechanical tests on him, so hooking him up to machines,
Mhm.
whatever technology they had back then. And from the data, um, the guy who developed the system, Master Wang, he said, okay, these seems to be the four big themes. And if we work with these four themes, we could probably train the system in an hour, less than an hour, maybe 30 minutes. And that makes it then, it's a shortcut, if you like, because true yogi masters, they live isolated from people generally, from society generally, because they've decided to dedicate themselves to just one thing. Now, the society we live in is more about being in harmony with the people around us, integrating our knowledge with these people. And Master Wang used to say, the true master now is the one that can walk down the side street and still be in a state of harmony with all the traffic and the
Mhm.
busyness and the noisiness of life. And that really resonated with me. That really I thought, right, that's where I need to be. And so I had this idea of a healer in every household was a big idea of having at least one person in everybody's household that is a healer, but not necessarily healing people, but is healing themselves. And then the resonance of that is carried through the household. Um, that's currently where I am at. I have my own weaknesses, if you like, or, health issues that I still work with, but I don't claim to be a master of anything other than trying to master myself in whatever capacity. I was drawn to this because of injury, and a slow recovery from injury. And then it kind of was always with me. The beauty I find with Qigong, Neigong is when you reach a certain level, a certain foundational level, it never regresses. Unlike, as you know, in the stuff that you've learnt over the years, is that you can take a muscle and stress it and it will grow and rebuild stronger. But it can get to a certain point in your life where you're never going to be able to build that muscle to the same size. It maybe can retain a certain element of strength. And what I found with this was the older I got, the better I got at it. So it was one of those rare things that age does not define your how good and how skillful you become with Neigong and Qigong. So the system automatically has longevity in it. And the things that I can do now from even 7, 8 years ago when we first saw each other um, physically is different. You know,
Mhm.
maybe it doesn't look as physical or as impressive, you know, low stances and you know the thighs being stressed. But then the way that I generate power and energy in the body is more refined. And likewise with my teachers above me, who, you know, I always look at them and think, gosh, I'd love to be at that level, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so for me, that was the key thing with this was longevity and being able to do this in my 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Like this student of mine who's 78, and it's like, well, this guy is going to be have no problem doing pretty much the same stuff as I'm doing in his 80s
Mhm.
and quite easily. So that's what really drew me to it, and also helped me recover from very bad burnout. I was quite a workaholic. I was obsessed with putting the hours in, you know,
Mhm.
and burning the candle at both ends, we call it. And I knew that herbal medicine, diet, sleep were going to help, but I needed something that was could switch on that mind-body connection,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
instead of trying to will myself back into good health, which has its place. I needed something that I could embody myself and that my body would listen to and then my mind would listen to. So I use my body as a computer, as a keyboard to program back into the mind to say, hey, look, this is the work I'm doing for myself. I'm self-nourishing. Will you listen? Will you follow that input? Will you return back to me the feedback, if you like, from me putting in the time and effort to be with just with myself? And that dragged me out of a dark hole. I mean, my wife can testify to seeing me, you know, not being able to really do anything, you know, lying in bed all day long and just struggling. I mean, I knew that I would recover because I was eating. It wasn't like I was starving myself. My body still felt like it needed fuel. So I knew it wasn't like a severe illness, but it was like a nervous system was shredded. And it took a good 2 or 3 years to recover, but with the help of the China universe as a system and the consistency with the training, I was able to come back from that burnout phase. And yeah, so that's a lot to cover. um, and I'm blessed to know people from all around the world that I can talk to and train with and share these gifts, these things that I have learned. Um, and I have in the past, John, you know, I've you know, always I don't know if you've experienced this yourself, but I've been like been chasing maybe I, you know, wanted to be able to have a certain skill set, you know, and wanted to be like the Jedi Knight, you know, be able to like, you know, move things with my mind and you know, there are people that chase that and they work with it, but it's they don't always grasp it because they're chasing it. And the beauty of Qi Gong and Nei Gong is that if that is part of what is the pathway for you, it will arise.
Yeah.
And Master Wang used to say, he used to have this saying EHF, which meant exceptional human feats. And most of us don't know what our exceptional human feat is, what we're able to do that is exceptional, a gift or a skill set. And the Qigong and the Neigong can draw that out of you. But you don't go chasing maybe the ability to set fire to paper with your hands without touching it. Don't go chasing trying to, you know, I don't know, bend metal with your mind. Don't go chasing that. Just stay within your training.
Mhm.
And if it's there for you, it's there for you. And yeah, I've had moments, you know, I've had moments where I've accidentally shot, you know, someone like transmitted maybe an electrical charge during training and you can it's palpable, you know, they feel it and it's like I'm like, oh, I want to get that back. How did I do that? You know, and then it eludes you because you're trying to chase it.
Mm.
So for me though, it's the gift that it gives me is strengthened my spiritual beliefs. It's strengthened an innate natural psychic ability that I've inherited. Um, so it's strengthened all of those abilities, but it's not, I didn't chase that. It was a side effect, if you like, of the training. Um, and also, I think, for people who want to do something that is perhaps uh, it suits their body type, maybe it suits their capacity to move and stand and turn and shake. And there's an effort needed in the Qigong. It's like at a very high level of training, it can be very stressful on the body, but it depends very much on what you're trying to achieve. Um, and you know this, right? You've witnessed this where you're very fit, you're very strong, you're very human being, but you can take somebody like yourself and put them into certain positions, stances, and movements, and they can immediately feel the effect. Now, say, picking up a 30 kg kettlebell and swinging it around, it's a different effect,
Mhm.
a tangible effect. I mean, being fit and strong like yourself does have a huge advantage, but your nervous system has to relearn things that maybe don't sit within that realm. And so people who are naturally strong and fit will have an advantage, but they also have to be able to let go of that advantage, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Whereas my fitness and my strength, I probably had more when I was younger. But when I look back at myself as a youth, it was all based around fear and the need to fight, the need to like push back against people, the need to have some secure ground against my environment. Um, and then having this, having this training, there's a sense of peace and a sense of quiet confidence that I thought that I would get from martial arts, but actually I didn't. It
Mm.
was more, for me, it was more external turmoil. I mean, I walked with great confidence into a bar or a club, or if I was going anywhere with my friends, they always wanted me to be in the group, walk through the park together. And my nickname was Monty, so they say, put Monty at the front. He'll sort it. If there's any trouble, he'll sort it out. And I used to think in my mind, crikey, I don't think I'm that tough. I'm really not that tough. But obviously, I was exuding that martial sort of presence. Um, Whereas the people I'm trained with now, they're the most unassuming, quiet, peaceful people. But my gosh, woe betide anyone who, inadvertently lays a hand on them. Um, yeah, so that's a lot to unpack there. I've ranted there for half an hour. Sorry.
Oh, that's great, man. That's great. I've got some notes I want to refer back to too. Just kind of jumping in, I was just thinking about your last point on how being physically fit can help, but it's not necessarily helpful. And, you know, I definitely had this experience. And it's funny because I referenced this first because we just had a team retreat here a few weeks ago, and I was teaching some Qi Gong to my team. And Anthony, one of my assistant coaches, is built just like me. He's a horse. His quads are bigger than mine, as much as I don't like to admit that. He is, he's a tank. And it's so funny because he's going through and he's 31. I think he's 31 now, and I'm 35. And so I can see the journey that he's on because I've been on it. And he's on the journey of softening, and he's becoming more in tune with his body and his energy body because of the ceilings and the limitations that he's hitting and the injuries that he's continuing to notice and experience in his physical body. Like you said,
Mm.
there's a certain point, and we can break it down. Like, yeah, ligaments and tendons don't keep up with the muscles, and if you train the joint capsules and you do your functional range conditioning, you can, but there's something else. There's something else there, and I really do think age is a factor there, where and like a lot of teachers talk about this, how, a lot of people, I think even Napoleon Hill said that most don't get in contact with their spiritual energy until their 40s, a lot until their 50s. And,
Mm.
I was blessed to, be spontaneously thrown into a relationship with that part of myself in my mid 20s. So I've been practicing early, but man, was the only reason that happened is because I went so far the other way that it was
Mm.
a necessity for me to have that conversation sooner than most. And so I laugh at where Anthony is in his journey at certain points, and I can see his frustration, like, shut up, stop laughing. I'm like, I'm just laughing at myself, bro. Because like one thing that to bring it back around to the team retreat is we're just doing Muji and
Mm.
just getting him to relax his shoulders, and
Mm.
he's holding with the muscles, and I just fucking can remember you right in front of me, like, relax your shoulders. I'm like, I am relaxing my shoulders. You're like, no, relax your shoulders. And like just giving him some of the cues you gave me of like resting the elbows on a table, and then remembering me practicing. And I remember the day I was on the dock. I was on a dock practicing in Washington at the time before I even moved to Maui. And I just remember like, I think I'm getting it. It's feeling different. And I had a similar experience
Mm.
with yoga in a different context, but just like when you start doing these internal practices, things start changing if you stay consistent and intentional and you put in that effort. And yeah, it is definitely something else that you can start tapping into, and it's this internal capacity. And that's one of the reasons why I loved Nei Gong and still love Nei Gong. And Mike, actually one of my other coaches, he's the virtual community manager. He loves Nei Gong. He loves the 8 step. And
Mm.
it's something that he like constantly reaffirms. He's like, I have to do that shit every morning. It just
Yeah.
is what taps me in and tunes me into my internal system. And I love how you said, I think it was the Wu Ji Chuang is
Yeah.
creating some sacred geometrical shapes, because that's exactly what I think of when I'm doing the Nei Gong is like, and it's very internal to external to internal to external. There's like,
Yeah.
you're definitely hitting these different shapes that are changing the way information, energy is moving and being processed through the system. And I love the concept already of Wu Ji. Like, me, that shit is my jam. And so
Yeah.
just hearing about that, I'm like, ooh, that sounds like something that I would love to chew on too. So
Yeah.
can't wait to
Yeah. Sure.
have that come
Well, I
through
mean,
with you.
I'm now studying this Ouija Chuan, so I'm the student of it. And obviously, there are people that I've met that are way more competent than myself. But I love the I always love being a student. There's something so blessed about it because it allows you to completely remove your ego, and experience being right down the bottom of that ladder again. And then it's nice to know you've got some direction in which to work towards. Um, I had this amazing experience with a student of this guy that's teaching me the stuff, and I think she's been training with him for many many years. I don't quote me, but I think something like 16 years or something. And she was showing me a particular posture, and she wasn't. What I liked about her was she was straight, and she like that German sort of directness.
Yep, yep, yep.
And she wasn't happy with the stance, and so she demonstrated to me why that stance was unhappy. She was unhappy with it. She proceeded to fling me about 20 feet backwards. And she's a tiny little lady, she's like she's smaller than Tiara. And but she did it in a way that was like, if it's wrong, this is what's going to happen. Fling. I was like, oh, okay. So, and then towards the end, she started to get happier with me. She was like, oh yeah, no, it's looking a bit better. You're kind of getting it. And But then at the end, she asked me, like, she didn't know anything about me and who I was and what did I do. And I said, oh, trained in Qi Gong for healing capacity, and oh, could you show me something? So I started doing a particular form, inner alchemy form, and she immediately stepped back and was like sort of vibing, like her body was like, and she was obviously so sensitive. I mean, this. Some people train with you and they're very stoic and they don't move and they can hold Wuji and they're just like solid. And I know people are very energy sensitive, and you could see that she was energy. And she started jumping around the place and crying and laughing. And she was like, "Oh, that's amazing." And I thought to myself, "Huh, interesting." It's like I'm less sensitive to the postures and the movements of this system, and I've not fully integrated yet with it. But then she's more sensitive to then when I go into my thing. And so it's like there's all these different layers and levels. There isn't one thing better or greater than the other. But what I do remember is one of my students, and you won't mind me saying this, Frederico, if you're watching, he was a boxer and a rugby player. And he still is a very, very, in his 50s, an extremely fit person. He played at a very high level. And he could not do the turning, the way we do some harmonization of the body, letting go, shaking and turning is a very basic form, but it's fundamental to just get embodied, to shake up the fluid, to move the lymph. Um, but he could not turn for years and years and years. It was like he was like this, turning, because the boxing, for some reason, and
Oh,
his
yeah.
training, he was
Yeah.
very relaxed when he was boxing, but his muscles were held in this tense way. And then one day he got it. I just remember him just constantly adjust, correct. And I thought, I'm not going to show him. I'm just going to talk to him and get that embodiment going. To build that awareness. Where are your shoulders now? Where are your elbows now? Are you happy with the way you're standing? Can you feel your pelvis turning? Is your spine, so getting him to self-actualize. And it was now it's like no problem. He can just, so it's not even so much that there's tension, it's more like a learnt behavior.
Hmm.
And somebody I met once said, you have to become the Qigong animal. So your body has to become this animal of Qigong, this creature, this evolved being. And it's a lot easier to plug Qigong and Nei Gong into your kettlebells, right? I'm sure if we took a set of kettlebells and we got into that Nei Gong that relaxed, the power generation is different, muscle set movement's different. You probably feel it more at a fascial level, like all this popularity around fascia lately it's not new. It's relearned, it's rehashed and relearned technology that I think we had more access to. But for your colleague, teaching him the Wuji is a phenomenal thing. It's a life-changing thing. As soon as those shoulders come down, and then he realizes, oh, I can rest within my structure. There's a realization and there's an understanding then, some of these Shaolin monks with very impressive postures they can hold for long, long, long periods of time. They can do it because they're not using a muscular system. They're using the structure, the framework of the skeletal system, but they're supporting themselves through their connective tissue.
Hmm.
They're activating through their mind. I mean, the Chinese way of training generally, I'm not saying in all cases because obviously I experienced different cases, but generally is they show you, and then you have to spend the next 60 years figuring out what that means. And I'm fortunate to train with masters who lived outside of China, or trained with masters that lived outside of China in some cases. And there's a lot more dialogue and communication. There's a lot more, well, teacher, is that right? No, no, just adjust the foot slightly, get that finger more in alignment with the thumb, and then you're like, oh, now I can feel the energy moving in a different way. And it's because they're at a stage now, a lot of these guys, where they know it's going to be lost if they don't break down the walls, open up, fast track you.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you this now, there's so many of my colleagues have spent years in standing postures and still cannot feel chi, can still not feel energy, can still not feel the dantian. And it's sad, it's a sad side effect of this uh, watch me, follow me style of training. Um, we see it in the martial arts, I'm sure, like maybe not so much in the grappling styles, but certainly in the karate styles, it's like you block like this, you punch like this, follow me. But they have no internal dynamics. They cannot generate the same level of power as the more senior because they're not showing it. So for me, the frustration of being burnt out, the frustration of wondering why, when I was working with clients, I felt so ill afterwards. That didn't make sense. And I knew that I needed to change the way I exist within this reality or change the way my body perceives this reality to offset a lot of um, those health issues I was having. And,
Yeah.
you know, for somebody who's quite muscular and strong. They've determined their physicality through that. And when you remove that need to be strong and you can embody strength through being soft, it's quite a revelation. It's like the brain goes, huh? Oh, we can do this? Yes, we can. Um, Babies do it all the time. I mean, you know this, one of your trainers I believe, watching a podcast of him years ago, talked about try and move like a baby for 10 minutes. And you get people on the floor and they follow a film of a baby lying down, rolling, sticking the legs up, touching their toes, turning over, doing a back arch, going onto the side, sticking the big toe in the mouth. After 10 minutes, these athletes were absolutely exhausted. I can't keep up with this baby's fitter than me yet because the baby's not using a muscular system. The baby's embodying its natural elasticity. And in fact, by moving like that constant, then it's building up a framework in which the baby can then stand
Hmm.
or hold itself upright. So the baby's innately training itself to then work with gravity. And so the idea with Qi Gong and Nei Gong is that we're aware of the gravitational forces on our body and what they can do and what they can't do. But if I got you to pick up a mango, right, or in this case a charger, if I pick it up, it's still subject to gravitational pull. But when it's with me, it's not, right? It's not subject to anything because we're now one system. We're now together as one thing. And that's the beauty with Neigong and Qigong is you're creating your body as one unit. And therefore, when it's one unit, it's not subject to the same forces as a person who's only very much moving in a linear fashion,
Hmm.
forward, backwards, sideways, left. We're now moving as one system as a whole, as a fluid dynamic. And so it makes sense why there's an aging reversal because dynamically all the cells are communicating, and the body has been used like a hydraulic device. It's one system pressurizing, depressurizing, pressurizing, depressurizing. Hence why a lot of these movements that we do have this strange kind of jellyfish movement. We are activating that connective tissue by moving this way. So a lot of this is a signal to tell the rest of the body, this is what I need you to do. And it's taken me a long time to reverse engineer that through watching, following, and asking questions and experimenting. And does that work for me? Does it not work for me? But the health benefits for some people are extremely powerfully spiritually grounding them, centering them, focusing their mind. For others, like miraculously healing quickly from a regular sports injury. For other people, it's recovery from illness. Um, and I love to see those transformations that you talked about with your colleagues, with your students, with your fellow brothers, because there's a realization, oh, I can actually hold this posture for a long time without stress, without nervous system stress. Um, and it's that letting go. It's an embodiment of what we're here to do, you know. You know, you can physically let go, then you can start to mentally let go, and then you can spiritually allow everything to flow, energetically allow everything to flow. And I think when we see these young monks in China being tortured in these low stances, a lot of it was preparation for later on, you know, for this kind of spiritual idea. But more recently, I was watching an interview with a Shaolin monk who trained to a really high level and traveled the world demonstrating, but completely destroyed his legs, like from the so many low stances and kicks, and after a while, he couldn't be in the troop. He couldn't be in this demonstration troop anymore. And so he went back and he said, like, what is the within my discipline that can help me heal? And he found a particular system of training. And he said, even still, it took many years to recover from the damage that had been done, but he recovered through consistency, through diligence, through constant correct signal going into the body, right? And you've studied this, right? In environment is has a larger signal to how the body responds. It can affect how the body adapts, right? So when you're doing your yoga and you're doing your strength training or your functional movements or mobilizations, breath work, these are all big signals that you can send to the small, you know, big signals to send to the smaller parts of the body. So in a way, Qigong, Nei Gong, Dao all these things, they're just another pathway. It's just another pathway, but their emphasis is very much on holism,
Hmm.
um, treating, respecting that you're strong, fit, healthy, you eat well, you're in a beautiful environment where you live. You know, 99% of everything is in your favor, but sometimes by doing the Qigong, you get that extra 1% that is enough to tip the balance in your favor. And 1% in over a lifetime is a lot. Like if you think you set a compass and you're 1 degree off, it's not really too much of a problem until you've gone 300 miles. And then suddenly you're way off course.
Hmm.
So that qigong is to me is like the compass needle. It just brings you back to the center. Oh, you're slightly off to the no, come back to the center. Oh,
Hmm.
you've gone up this way, come back to your center.
Hmm.
And I think as much as we can maintain that center, we feel grounded, rooted, centered, and then we're respecting the system as a whole, then that naturally has to have a health benefit for you,
Hmm.
at whatever capacity.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
there are
integration.
ladies that I taught that are like they work in a bakery, you know, and they stand all day kneading bread, and some of them are way better qigong, neigong practitioners than some of the top athletes,
Hmm.
you know. And it can be interesting, and it can also be frustrating for those people who have learned to be very high level at what they do, and then suddenly now they have to relearn how to use their body.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's another rant.
And it just takes time too, like I
Yeah.
can relate to that of like, and referring back to Anthony, I can see where he's at because I remember that frustration. And it's a different way. And not only is
Yeah.
it a different way, but it just requires time. It's a new set of skills. And like you said too, which I love, was the nuances of all of the paths are within themselves infinite portals of depth to mastery. But I think really, especially Age of Aquarius, where we are, you know, integration and embodiment as a collective species, and what you said too about how it's time to share these teachings before they're lost. I agree on that. And on the other note, consciousness is ready. The soil is so fertile. Like I'm thinking of the exact same session where I had Anthony, like, I'm like, oh,
Mm,
there I am, that old way. That's the old way. It's a perfect example of the force,
mm,
physical force, the hyper masculine, that way. And then I had Gabby, our photographer, who's born and raised in Costa Rica and is just like tuned in, tapped in, turned on, just automatic. And
mm,
I mean, she's just an open, clearly open channel, very connected to her feminine energy, just an open channel, like very soft, very like Qigong naturally. She's doing Qigong naturally all the time
mm.
just by
Yeah.
being in that state of Wu Ji more than trying to force. And she'd never done Qigong before. And I just put her in Zhang Zong, just getting her in base position and like, okay, yeah, tuck your pelvis a little bit to create a little link there. Okay, now tuck your chin a little bit and now, lengthen the string just a little bit. And then, okay, now sink your body, sink, sink, sink. And she's just like, 2, 3
Mm,
minutes in, and she's like, you can see she's having an experience, an energetic
mm,
experience, Kundalini, whatever you want to call it, of like, okay, the circuits have been opened. And because she's already so open and the channel is clean and clear and ready, it's just like, oh, let's plug this in here, beep, beep, boop, boop. That's it, like 3 minutes. And she's just, and I think that is going to be more and more the case, especially with the younger generation coming in,
sure.
where their circuitry is different. And just
Absolutely.
having a little bit of that framework to like, okay, there you go, you're good,
Mm,
and just like the energy starts flowing. And like something too that I definitely have experienced and I see more and more that you spoke to and that I can speak to as well. And I see a lot in my clientele, especially in that middle-aged man that's hitting burnout, that's yanged. They've yanged, they've yanged, they've yanged, and they've burnt the candle up. And I noticed
mm,
this especially in myself, is like you can't get yang from yang, you can only get yang from yin. And
mhm,
the yang practices will only work until a certain point in your life, and then at a point you have to start cultivating yin if you want to keep expressing yang at that high capacity. And without
mm,
pranayama, without qigong, without meditation, without nature, that's another thing I love about these practices is a lot of the times they just help to elicit the opportunity to get off technology and get away from blue light and artificial light and non-native EMFs and 5G and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth
mm,
and on, that's
mm,
disrupting that natural flow of energy within us that is there,
mm,
whatever little bit is there that's flowing, that's been, buried and calcified, is just getting hammered on by technology. And then you add work, and then you go lift weights in a blue lit gym with polyester and spandex and Bluetooth headphones, and you just
mm,
exacerbate. And then it's like you see this old dude in the park doing Qigong barefoot, and he's 80 and he's stronger and more flexible than you. And you're like, okay, there's something
mm,
here. And that's something that I've really noticed is when I'm not doing my yin practices and when I'm not getting my skin on the earth and especially skin in the sun and charging that internal battery and cultivating yin, I
mm.
notice like I'm so sensitive myself now after, 12, 13 years of practice. And even just like you said, dude, 1% when you're that sensitive, you notice it's a pretty notable difference. Like just eating food too late or eating too much food, you don't sleep as
Yeah.
well. And I'll still wake up and do all my things, but I'm aware there's a difference in my internal flow of energy. Like it's a little bit more difficult to get up. My body's just a little bit stiffer and a little bit tighter. And like if you're looking at like any kind of high level performance, like you said, 1% cultivated over 10 years, 1% for 100 days is 100% change. You multiply that by, 365, you're looking at 3x in 1 year, 10 years, 30x.
Mm.
arbitrary what that number is, but it's a significant difference. And the more sensitive you are, the more tuned you are. Like homegirl that's just like tuned in, and Gabby, my photographer, like, dude, 2, 3 minutes of a practice or 2, 3 minutes of doing something that blocks or disrupts that flow of energy, like it's notable. And in this game at this level, even me only being 35, but I'm entering that phase of my life where it's like I have to reorient and restructure the way and reprioritize the way I live and the way I train. Like now I'm
Mm,
doing, other than like late night calls like this for the podcast, like I'm working outside 90% of the time. I'm not wearing contacts anymore so I can get light in my eyes. I'm going shirtless and barefoot as often as possible. Like I'm prioritizing cultivating yin because I know I'm going to be burning up yang all day long. I'm going to be working, I'm going to be training, I'm going to be doing
mm,
a lot of externally focused activity. And if I don't charge my yin battery, man, how I notice it now. And looking at the work that we do, like my three pillars, performance, longevity, and well-being, these practices are that 1% to those three buckets that are so necessary, and they are all different. I absolutely do agree. Like even
mm,
just the little that I know that you've taught me and I've practiced over the last several years is a notable difference in the different forms and the different movements and how those now show up in my yoga. The way that I move when I'm doing different yoga postures, even like a warrior pose, for example, like even just the hand movements. And there's just a notable difference, like you said. And it's like that pulsation that we see in cells, in atoms, the way atoms vibrate, the way the cosmos itself breathes. And it's like, okay, micro to macro, the Tao, all of this, it's like we are that. You're starting to see all these principles play out, and it's not a knowledge necessarily. It's not something that you learn from reading about per se.
mm,
It's literally the teachings express within you through this direct experience from practicing these movements, whether
mm,
it's Qi Gong, Nei Gong, China Universe, Wu Ji Chuang. They're all like reading a different book that,
mm,
all have similar themes, but different characters and different plot lines. And it just helps you have a better understanding of the whole story, the whole picture. And it goes back to those axioms, those, paradoxical, hilarious, annoying, but like so true axioms of like know thyself and like
mm,
you are the universe inside out and all that kind of shit. And it's like, man, you start
mm,
doing these practices long enough, you start spending enough time out in nature doing this stuff, and it's just like it's in you. You know it to be true, and you can speak to it and articulate it in a way that I love, especially like, and you're a great example of that. And I'm a student in this process as well, is like we don't have to read books on this stuff to be able to talk about it because it is something that is literally inside our DNA, inside our cellular structure, inside our soul blueprint that becomes activated, becomes epigenetically expressed, becomes alive in you, literally alive
mm,
through this stuff, through this practice, through this movement. And it's
mm,
fascinating to see how that journey, especially for a man, I guess, or at least for both of us, as that direct experience of like masculine, yang, hard, just beat it to death and you'll get there, and it's like you're just beating yourself to death, and then
yeah,
like going back into this softening and like, oh, now, and the extreme human feats,
yeah.
like how I love too that concept of like even if you're not able to burn fire, like what an extreme human feat compassion is, patience is, relatability, patience and like that kind of stuff that's just like,
Or imagine
whoa,
if you're if you're an authentic human, like you're
yeah.
naturally authentic, and then you're training, that authenticism is 10, as you would say, 10x. And then, this makes sense that, when people are in the present of enlightened people, maybe that person already had enlightenment, but because of their training, the spiritual training or the physical training, stretching, moving the body, eating well, being in sunlight. It's like for you when we were on the beach in Tofino and those young guys, they naturally gravitated to you. You were only like a few years older than them, maybe 10 years older than them, but still in that capacity to communicate with them.
Hmm.
And they completely opened up to you because you were like, I have been there. I have
Hmm.
been where you have been. You know, this is where I am now, and you can get there too. And they were like, oh my God, can I? You're
Yep.
like, yeah, man, I was doing way more bad stuff than you were at your age, you know? And it's good for them to see, oh, that transformation is possible.
Yeah.
You know, they say like a leopard doesn't change its spots, but I think if you change the environment in which that leopard was in, right, it suddenly can lose its spots or become dark and become what we call a panther.
Hmm.
You know, or a puma or whatever. It
Hmm.
over time it can adapt to its environment. And the quickest way to change your environment is to change, as you know, the way you move, the way
Mm.
you talk, the way
Mm.
you interact, the way you consume things, the way you express things.
Hmm.
Um, and you know, some vessels are like yours. They're built for power, strength, movement, flexibility. Like that's the vessel you have been blessed with. My vessel it has been battered. I mean, I'm covered in scar tissue, lumps and bumps. Um, and you know, my fingers don't work kind of strange. There's all kinds of weird alien stuff going on with me, but it I made it work in a certain capacity for a certain length of time until it didn't. And then I
Hmm.
had to change the input. I had to change the input so that then it would and I had to kind of relearn myself.
Hmm.
To relearn that standing like this and being like, come on, I fucking have you, you
Yep.
know, that
Yep.
had to go. It didn't serve, it wasn't serving me. It wasn't very grounded, it wasn't very centered.
Yep.
You know, burning the yang. I like to burn my yang quite a lot. It's chasing women everywhere, burning up my yang energy, you know. And yeah, look, the thing is, you know, and I know you can live with a low. It's a little bit like an engine. You can drive the car with a little bit of fuel in the bottom. You'll go a certain distance, and then no fuel, you can't go, right? But you can refill that car again, and you can go again. But if you have no yang energy, the car will never go. It doesn't matter if you've 6 tanks of petrol or diesel. That engine is not going to do anything because it can't mobilize itself. So yang energy is important for life. It's what mobilizes the heart, right? And so you're gonna die without yang energy. You need the sun. That's why you go out into the sun. It's the quickest way. It is the fastest way of getting yang energy into the body,
Yep.
more so than food, you know. Um, that boiling flame, like here's a funny one. Somebody said to me the other day, you know, oh, do you believe in God? You know, do you believe in this? Or do you believe in worshiping the sun and the moon? And I said, well, what is more real? You know, we know the sun is there, we know it exists, we know the moon is there, we know it exists within this current construct. I mean, um, have I seen God? No. Do I know what God looks like? No. But I think for me, the word God is an omnipresent state. It's a state that exists within us, outside of us. It's that force, you know, like the Jedi, the force that binds everything.
Mhm.
But I know that I can worship the sun, and we do, right? We here in Ireland. Oh, I mean, here now you're late at night. I know it's late there, but now the sun is coming through you know, and it's coming through, and it's warming the land. It's adding in extra yang. It makes sense for us to. I think this year is the first year in a long time we've had really good weather in Ireland, and my body is naturally tanning. It's just naturally slowly getting darker just from just from training outside without any real capacity to want to strip off and get the sun. It's just naturally responding to that warmth, that caring, that nourishing energy. Um, and you know, we have to remember that a lot of these things that me and you are doing, that we're training in, existed long before Taoism what ism, and anything that's an ism is a creation of a human
Hmm.
behavior.
Hmm.
Before that, if you needed to call on your friends, you'd stand out in nature and chant. The Aboriginals had the woomera stick and the whoop, whoop. They'd make sound, vibration to call their friends in, to send signals. Natives would light fires, use yang energy to communicate, send signals up to heaven. Um, it's all just there, and you're right because there's a saying here in Ireland by it was a famous rugby player said, that knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. And
Hmm.
that's what we're working with is there's a huge difference between knowledge and wisdom. And I do think this practice brings about more wisdom, more innate wisdom. We
Yep.
still have the books and the scriptures
Yep.
and the sacred geometry that's all around us if you just open your eyes and look. I mean, look at where you are. I mean, if you go and find standing stones where you are, there's going to be sacred geometry. The stone circle we were at with my son, somebody had carved. I mean, this is something that I think the circle is, it's very old. I'm gonna say it's more than 3,000 years old. And somebody carved a phallus and on one stone, and then the other carved the vulva. So they
Mm.
knew that where the sun was coming up, that's like the yang male energy, and where the moon was coming as the female yin receptive energy.
Mm.
So yin and yang has been with us as long as we could see the moon and the sun, the
Mm.
stars and the ocean, the volcanoes and the water, um, the rock and the river. Yin and yang has been with us as part of our nature. And as we transition into, as you say, into Aquarius, it's Aquarius is the water carrier, right? Even though it's an air sign, she is carrying the knowledge on her shoulders and she's pouring it gently towards us. All the
Mm.
knowledge you could ever want is being given to you, but the wisdom is knowing how to use that knowledge appropriately.
Mhm.
And I think that's what your clients, my clients, guys my age, I mean, a lot of my clients are blokes, into Qigong. In
Yeah.
in the healing world, it's
Yeah.
women, but in the spiritual movement, it's men.
Yeah.
And they're all maybe 35 to 55 age
Yep.
range. A
Yep.
good friend of
Exactly.
ours, George. George is one of my students.
Yep.
And he swings and roundabouts with it, but now he's like getting into it, and you can see he's like, oh, I feel so much stronger, so much better. I feel healthy, and he's copying you. He's going out into the sun. So he's
Yep.
taking what I've taught him, and he's taking what you've shown him, and he's putting the two. He's working it out himself. And
Yep.
that is way more powerful than just somebody telling somebody what to do. He's taking the two bits of wisdom, merge them together.
Yeah.
And that you have an advantage in that when you lift a bell or when you use a yoga band or like when you understand the concepts of Qi Gong and Nei Gong, you can apply that into your stretch. You can apply
Absolutely.
that into your lift. And
Yep.
so you can really say to yourself, okay, this next 20 lifts, I'm going to really focus on expanding the what we call the Jin energy, the tendon power. So I'm going to lift with that extra 1%, 2% extension to activate the tendons and send a signal back to the body to strengthen them. And so, I mean, there's athletes I've taught some of this stuff to, and they're just blown away.
Hmm.
They're like, why aren't we learning this, from
Yeah.
the beginning? And I said,
Yeah.
because it, it's, I don't know, it's like it's been buried a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
I think time
maybe
too, like like I loved the analogy of like the water base is like, but like, fire hose in the face, like I got all that you more than you could ever handle, son. But like, careful what you wish for. You're gonna get a wet head if you want this whole jar. And the age of information that we're in
mm,
is past. That I really I was just talking about this on a podcast the other day. We have moved like the whole technological evolution where like the amount of information is doubling every X amount of years, and then now it's months and like weeks, and it's just like there's so much information. I had a call with a prospect the other day, and he said, I just, paralysis by analysis occurs, fight, flight, or freeze. A lot of people are freezing because they're inundated by information and they are so overwhelmed that it actually causes non-action. They don't know what to do because there's too many choices. And I've been, I think maybe we even probably have talked about this of where we've moved past the age of information and now we're moving into, and we have fully moved into the age of integration. It's
Mm.
now practical application, embodiment, wisdom is that is the juice. That is the golden egg now. Is okay, yeah, there's all these techniques, but like until you can actually embody the basics and practically apply the basics, trying to learn, some of these energetic concepts, like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. If you can't even take care of your own physical organism, how are you going to be able to comprehend quantum mechanics and like, these principles that like are in the Rig Veda and in the Tao Te Ching and books that like they never used scientific words and stuff, but they're talking about entanglement. They're talking about these like high level concepts, but from this really grounded, embodied, integrated space. And then it expresses in the physical form as the last, like you said in the beginning, icing on the cake. You get those benefits as extra credit if you're in the right intention and you're actually embodied and integrated. And I was just training a client on Saturday. What was that, yesterday? And he was talking about I was doing some Tai Chi, and then I was lifting with him, and he's I turned him on to some Qi Gong, and then now he's like exploring all the other things, and like he's like a sponge. He's at that stage in his journey, and he was like, "Oh man, I was just during that last set thinking about the Tai Chi I was doing the other day and applying it, and
Mm.
I felt stronger. I felt like I could do more." I was like, "Yeah, because you're integrating more of your system, like you were talking about earlier. Instead of just using the muscles, now you're using the muscles in conjunction with the bones, the tendons, the fascia. You're using the whole unit together, and so." The whole is always greater than the sum of its parts, and we're definitely in that phase, that era of integration. And I see the integration of these internal energetic practices merging with the traditional wisdom of the East, merging with the science and the innovation of the West. And I absolutely believe you'll see more and more. Where I'm seeing it the most in the performance space is breath work. Now, a lot of the MMA fighters are using breath work before they're fighting, and mindset training, visualization, and some of these techniques that it's like this is all qigong, man. It's and again, like what is qigong but a made up word to explain these practices that predate language because movement predates language, and so it's like it's in us. Our ancestors did this.
Yeah,
We got here because of that stuff.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think, why has all this been so much emphasized by Asian culture and, sort of the Chinese and the or East Orient? I think it's because they documented it. They formalized it, they wrote it down, they put it into scrolls. None of the other cultures really did that. And so we assume that it's particular to Asia because they have evidence that it existed. The tombs, there are caves and tombs that have been excavated in the 70s with scrolls of people doing types of exercises, for 1,000 years ago. But who's to say that, a monk living here in Ireland in a round tower wasn't self-cultivating in a way that was different to the norm? It's just it
Yeah.
wasn't recorded. It wasn't the
Or
emphasis.
or lost or wiped out, from invading cultures like
Possibly,
Central
possibly,
America. Like
possibly.
they're now looking at Central America using satellite imagery, and they're like, "Oh my God, there's hundreds of pyramids that are
Sure.
just covered over by Amazon jungle, but that's a man-made geometrical structure underneath all of that foliage,
Mm.
and what's under that?"
Sure.
probably a lot of these lost tomes and stuff, they either wiped out or just haven't been rediscovered yet.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like when, we've talked about plant-based medicines, both indigenous and more artificial. Um, I think it was the last time I did anything like that was the Blue Lotus, the Nile Blue Lotus, and it was actually purely in the wrong context and the wrong setting for me. But the thing that I was shown was sacred geometry,
Mm,
and when I saw it, I was like, okay, it's a confirmation of something that I realize that that's all within us all. It's
mhm.
probably used to construct this reality.
Yeah.
It's a form of coding, it's a
Yep.
form of programming.
Yep.
And, I could go on endless stories around this, but a teacher of mine said he was in Kerala. You've been there, I think,
Yep.
Kerala. And he was in those ancient carved caves, in South Kerala. And
Yeah. Yep.
he was walking around, and he said on the wall were images of people with light coming out of their head, of the crown chakra. Very similar to what you might see in a church, in a medieval church, where there's
Yep.
people with the halos. And he asked the locals, who is, oh, they've got, oh, these are the children of the light, we call them, they're inspirational people that came to Earth. He's like, what, came to Earth, as in born? No, came to Earth. But what fascinated him was all these geometric patterns have been carved in the rock. And a lot of them were religious symbols that we've adopted,
Yep.
right? The cross, we didn't invent that. We adopted it from somewhere else. The
Mhm.
Star of David was adopted, yin yang symbol adopted. So we have learned from possibly either more wise cultures or more knowledgeable cultures. Perhaps also we've experienced extreme disaster on the planet, and so we've had to lost a lot of this, and we're slowly relearning it in a
Mhm.
different fashion. There's a lot of speculative, but I think what this desire using technology to find things like these lost cultures, I truly believe we were probably far more advanced than we think we are, than we were, but we were advanced in alignment with where the energy was on the planet, maybe more in harmony with the geometrics and the geostructure of the planet. In this day and age, I feel like we're trying to artificially manipulate the environment instead of enhancing the environment. So, artificial intelligence, artificial lighting, uh, artificial communication, and there were monks here in Ireland that would sit in round towers, and I say to a colleague, I'm convinced they got to the top of the tower and they were copying what people were doing in Tibet. They were meditating, and it was a form of clear and transparent communication in the mental astral realm. We're doing this, we're working with this today, we're growing these crops because we believe the weather is better on this way, and transmitting this information to other people
Yep.
within that. And people laugh at me and say, "Oh, well, that can't be true. How do you know?" I said, "I don't know that, but I know there are tribes of monkeys in the north part of Japan that learn how to break open a shell to eat something, and without any instruction to monkeys living on the southern part of Japan, the monkeys in the south part of Japan suddenly start, copying this without any direct intervention, and it is that quantum." I think it was Sheldrake called it morphic fields. This idea that there is this atmosphere that we live within is a conductor for thought and ideas, and we see why so many people at the moment are in distress and in stress because there's so many people in the world suffering, and that suffering is rising up, hitting the atmospheric surface and then rebounding. And for those of us that are more sensitive to that, we're not sleeping properly or our rhythms are out and we can't control that. But what we can control is getting up in the morning,
Mhm.
going to the sunlight, grounding ourselves,
Mhm.
you know, And it's something actually I wanted to address was there's a difference between earthing and grounding,
Yeah.
right? There's a difference between rooting and centering. And I think, I don't know if it's just semantics, potato, potato, tomato, tomato. But really for me, earthing is that walking and, doing what you're doing, just getting out and touching the earth. And the earth is it's ionic atmosphere, allows for a realignment of the tissue, of the cellular polarity. And then for me, grounding is you relaxing into that structure and sinking your way into the earth and allowing the earth to receive you whilst allowing the yang to elongate you. So you're actually embodying yin and yang
Hmm.
physically within your structure. And then centering is that idea of where is your mind at? You know, is it over here? Is it inside you? Is it somewhere in between? Is it connected to heaven and earth at the same time? Um, because we can be here doing this podcast, but you could be thinking, "Oh, I'm a bit hungry now. What am I going to eat after this?" At the same time, the mind is infinite. It can be at multiple places. You know, um, and I think, as you said, go and read as many books as you want on Qigong. You're not necessarily going to get the information you need for you. I've written a book on Qigong and it's found in Qigong instruction. Half the people read it, loved it. The other half said it's useless. It doesn't teach me anything. Like,
Yeah.
that's okay. It's not design. It's just, it was me. I felt I needed to verbalize. I felt I needed to get out of my mind onto paper, just like a dump of information. And I
Mhm.
was actually wrote it on the back of an in-flight magazine on the way back from China. I wrote the whole thing down and then I vocalized it into it was before my proper mobile phones. We had like these, I don't know what you call them, a dictaphone. And then somebody literally typed it up, and that's how the book was written. And that worked for me, but I needed to verbalize those
Yeah.
ideas, those concepts of training. Now I look back in the book and I go, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
But it was
So,
where I was
yeah. Yeah.
at that point in time, you know. Um, yeah, but it's great. Like I've obviously seen you grow huge amounts. I mean, it's exponential growth, really. We were having conversations, 8 years ago about you doing all this stuff, and it's consistency. So what I wanted to say is the consistency is key. Exceptional human feats arise uh, because there's a natural talent in there, but hard work, and I mean hard work, appropriate hard work, not burnout. Hard work will triumph over talent. And when I mean hard work, I mean it's more really what it means is the gong. We talked
Yeah.
about that at the very
Yep.
beginning of this. So going full circle, we're going back to the gong, which is skill, effort applied over time consistently. You know this, right? You're a trainer, you're a coach, you're a mentor, you're a lifestyle advisor, you're a dietitian. There's an embodiment of all those things. You can't separate them. They're all necessary. But the reason why you look as good as you do, you're as strong as you do, is because you do something every day. You know when to rest, you know when to work out, you know when to eat healthy, you know when it's okay to have a little blowout
Yep.
because you've done, you know, 10 years of hard work. I can have one day off at least and have a pizza.
Hmm.
And even having a healthy pizza. Where I've fallen down is I was using the Qigong and Nei Gong in the beginning as this is an advisory, is don't use it as a tool to navigate your life, to overcome, to like do more of the same. And that's what
Powerful.
I was using it
Yeah.
to become a stronger healer, a more powerful acupuncturist, a more da 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 da. So it's like topping up that energy to become like, but
Mm,
that's the wrong way to use it. And that's mistakes that I've made. It should be the reset. It should be the
mm,
reboot, a
hmm.
consistent rebooting of the system,
Hmm.
a consistent checking in. Because some days you do the Qigong, no, I'm not really into this, you know. Even I
Yeah.
go, oh, I can hear my mind going, fuck this.
Yeah, 100%, bro.
I can
100%.
smell someone cooking bacon. Oh, fuck this training. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just go back to bed, Anthony. You've had a long day. You deserve to go back to bed and just lie in, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that, you know. And you just have to go, hang on a minute. Who's talking here?
Hmm.
Who's having this conversation?
Hmm.
You know, is that really me? You know, um, and I think, I mean, it depends on your audience and what your audience want. I mean, you have enough knowledge to carry them in the retreats with what you have. There's always levels of advancement, but if you have a good strong foundation in your training, Qigong, Nei Gong, Daoyin, it'll carry you. It'll carry you. And the beauty of this work that I do is when you reach a certain level, you never regress.
Yeah.
As long as you don't cheat yourself. Like, so if you set a standard that you want to increase your standing, so you want to do half an hour standing a day, commit to that. And it's one thing I learned. And I mean, if you're going to train to go towards 30 minutes standing without moving, then you build up very slowly and consistently. So you're not cheating yourself. But don't if you've got to 28 minutes, don't do 27 the following day. You know, that's the one thing I learned is if you're going for 30, you go for 30, but you don't cheat yourself. Like I know sometimes if I'm doing push-ups, one day I might do like 25 without stopping in one go. And then the next day I can only do 14. And then I go, oh, shit. And like I know that that's just where I'm at. And I have to be accepting that that's just where I'm at. But with Neigong and Qigong, it's different because you know you can stand to 27 minutes. You stand at 27 minutes. It's a different kind of
Mm.
strength and fitness.
Hmm. Yeah. Fortitude of the mind.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's any like I mean obviously if I only did 14 push-ups, I'd probably rest and then do another 11 just for my own mind to be at ease with myself, you
It's
know.
different though.
Um,
It's different. And I totally hear you on at a point you reach a level where, when the student is truly ready, the teacher disappears. Like I even on my own training, I don't count my reps anymore. I just go to the point of where I know is the fatigue point. And
yeah.
I'll still track the training and the sets. I don't necessarily track the reps per se, but like the perceived exertion is always going to be around an 8, whether it's 5 reps one day or not. And I notice like, oh, I added a fourth day of training this week and I got 6 less reps on my push-ups, but the perceived exertion was just as hard. And that I think is the key variable is like make sure
Mm,
that you're pushing to that point that you know is actually your point rather
yeah.
than like uh, I was close. Good enough.
Yeah.
Like the the
Yeah.
the enemy of greatness is just good enough. I love that quote.
Yeah. I mean, exactly the same thing. Um, I think there was a point, I think, for the first 2 years of when I was doing formal, like formally, I wanted a certificate. I wanted to have the cert on my wall. I wanted to be insured,
Yeah.
right? So I had to go and get
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, fuckers.
Yeah, it's like, and that's just the way it is,
Yep.
for us.
Yep. Yep.
We're
Bullshit.
confined by these ridiculous rules. But I
Fuckers,
mean, for
yeah.
you, yeah, look, anyway, I mean, when I think about, some of my teachers, they don't have a formal certificate in anything,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yep.
it's just a lineage. It's just you hold that lineage.
Yep.
Um, so anyway, I'm training and in a way, I suppose for me, the discipline now, having that, accountability. And I built myself up where for 300, I have it recorded somewhere online it was an old blog, was it Blogger, I think it was called. It was a
Sweet.
Google thing.
Yeah.
And it's
Yep.
stored every day. It's probably somewhere. I'll try and dig it out for you. It's
Yeah. It's
hilarious.
on the dark
Some of the
web.
comments in that. And I think it was called Sat Nav for the Soul was the name of the blog. You could probably see if you could still find it. But Sat Nav for the Soul, and that's what I thought Qigong was. It was the satellite navigation for your soul. But I would do standing for 1 hour. I
Mm.
committed to 1 hour every day, 365 days. And it was crazy. Some of the days you're like, oh shit. fuck, it's like, 11 o'clock at night and I haven't done my standing. And it was like, oh, don't do your standing. Just go to bed, like busy days. No, I have to, like, I've committed.
Yeah.
And then you'd write then afterwards. And it's sometimes when you were like exhausted, tired, you had a heavy day and you commit to an hour and then these incredible
Yeah.
metaphysical, it's because you've had to let go, right? You just had to let go, just fucking stand. Don't move. Just stand, breathe. And then there'd be a temptation to go, only 2 more minutes to go. And it's like, don't clock watch. And
Yeah.
after now, I do very little standing practice now. Not because it's not important. It's not where I'm at.
Yeah, you're there. You're already there.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. If we did an hour, I'm sure my legs would be shaking, right? I'm sure because the physicality has not
Of
been
course.
trained.
Of course.
But I would still be able to do an hour because the mentality and the spirit and the chi energy has been trained.
Totally.
Um, Now you wouldn't catch me doing a low horse stance anymore.
Yeah.
That would not happen. You could probably do it, but I wouldn't be able for that because I know what my limitations are right now at 53 nearly. So it's like, uh, what am I doing this training? So you'll ask yourself, why am I doing this training? For you when you're teaching your students is you're giving them an understanding of themselves.
100%.
You're showing them another path to understanding.
Yep.
Um,
Teaching
I'm
them
doing it
patience.
because if I don't, I know I'll go off the rails mentally. It's like
Mhm.
it's helping me keep that center led, and it helps me in my work. It helps me if I understand myself when I'm diagnosing a condition or working with a difficult patient who's you can tell, that I have a better understanding of them. I don't make any judgments on that. Maybe in the past, as a young therapist, I would have been very judgy. And it's like, okay, they're in their process,
Yep.
and either I can choose to guide them, help them, or I can say, you know what, it's not for me,
Yep.
and that's okay. There's no right or wrong. Um, People who are, some of the most spiritual people I've met are CEOs of big corporations. It's like, whoa, you do that? Yeah, it's like, I go swimming in the sea every morning naked, and I was like, in Ireland in the freezing cold water. Yeah, it's great. And then I asked them, like, are you doing this because it's a cool thing to do? Or are you doing it because there's benefits to it? Or are you doing it because you read it somewhere and it's just, a lot of them say, I just feel that's what I need to do to reconnect.
Yep.
I'm thinking, okay, that's amazing. And this is what's happening. And we're going to, as you say, we're going to see more and more of this.
Hmm.
Our job is to say, this is an option. You know, maybe yoga isn't for you, maybe it is. Maybe Pilates isn't for you, maybe it is. Maybe you're searching. Try this. Have
Hmm.
this as an opportunity to
Hmm.
explore your body, your mind, your
Hmm.
spirit in a different sense.
Hmm.
And you know, for me, I know it's for me. It just suits me where I'm at. I mean, I used to work in a yoga studio and they used to invite me in for yoga, and I did feel amazing after it. But I didn't have. We say this. There's this thing in Irish called graw, and graw is like a love. It's more than a love. It's a passion. It's a pull. You feel pulled to it. And the Qigong, I remember seeing this manual. When we had to get this training to get my cert, but I saw this manual for a college, and the manual sat on my bedside locker for years. And I just picked it up and read it. And my wife turned to me and she said, "You're thinking of going training again, aren't you?" I was like, "Yeah, I just feel I need to have something on the wall." And she goes, "If you do this, it's the last fucking time you do a long form training because I'm sick of you not being here." And I went and did 4 years, 4 years. And there were 28 of us in year one, and four of us graduated in year four. I mean, it was such a massive dropout rate. Now, I'm still friends with a lot of people from that college. But we all went through a process. Some people broke up, some people remarried, some people went into breath work, instead of Qigong. Some people went
Yep.
into ayahuasca doing ceremonies. They
Yep.
just went in all the different directions. And I just stuck with it because for me, it was like the stubbornness of that martial discipline of I started and I'll finish it.
Mhm.
And the last, very last lesson was with one of my teachers who had sat with me for 4 years. And my father had passed away a couple of weeks earlier, but I wanted to go and finish the training, get my diploma. My wife came with me. And the very last lesson, we were working with the liver, gallbladder energy, which
Yeah.
has a lot to do with repressed emotion, anger, frustration. And I felt like I wanted to pick up the chair and throw it at him. This is 4 years of being super spiritual, super aligned, energy all flowing, magic, magic, magic. All I want to do is pick up this chair and like smash him over the head. And now this guy's a big dude. He's like ex-US Air Force, uh, dreadlocks, gold teeth, like real, like something out of Pulp Fiction. And he just went, ah, there he is. I said, what do you mean? He said, I've been waiting 4 years for him to show up to the party. And I went, ah, that's what this whole 4 years. It was nothing to do with the certificate. It was to get that last bit of this primal anger that I carried for many, many years. I mean, I could be at a house party with friends, enjoying having the crack and fun and, all the ridiculous debauchery that would ensue, and then collapse in the corner of a room and somebody poke me to get me to wake up to go home. And I would suddenly just fling into attack mode. I'd just jump up and start, swinging the hands and feet flying and bodies going left, right, and center for no absolute reason whatsoever other than the anger and the frustration that was held within me. So to see that me, that 17-year-old me, was I was like, oh wow, I spent 4 years to get here, to get that last squeeze of the rag. That's what that liver is. It's the dirty rag you sometimes have to squeeze out because the liver, no, you couldn't pay a human being to do what a liver does. I mean, it'd be like living in Chernobyl, constantly scrubbing the body. And
Yeah.
and I think that's what needed to happen is that last bit of anger and resentment and frustration and had to come out. And that was my graduation, was letting go of that 17-year-old warrior, bullshit warrior,
Hmm.
basically.
Hmm. It's crazy. Like your soul led you to that experience through a brochure that
Yeah,
gave you
yeah,
this raw that was ultimately just your soul being like, yo, bro, you got to get this out. And
yeah.
here's the path. Let me breadcrumb
Mm,
you down this little pathway. And it's going to take
yeah.
some time. It's going to take some time, but I promise on the other side of it, it's going to
And
be really,
it was a 5 element brochure, like we'd studied the 5 elements
yeah.
together.
Oh,
And
shit.
it was that constant image of those 5 elements. It just would not leave me alone. And the actual training hall, the first 2 years was stunning, stunning hall. It's still there. It's an old shiatsu school.
Mm,
But on the walls of the shiatsu school were all these various interpretations of Buddha. So the green Tara, the medicine, the medicine Buddha, da 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 da. And now the guy that's training me is really highly ranked was highly ranked as a student in Buddhism and can just like rattle off, oh, that means this means that. That's what I'm like, this imagery. It was always understanding that full circle. It's
mm,
that's the circular relationship of yin and yang. Going into that very yang state of movement, anger, frustration, and then coming back receptive yin harmonization, consolidation, withdrawing, wisdom, back into growth, movement, light. And that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing every day is you're going through your yin and yang cycle. And we give it a label. So, UV lights,
yep.
appropriate amount of, ionization, yin, yang energy, atmospheric pressure changes. But we're actually naturally always doing that.
Yep.
We are actually don't even realize we're always doing that.
Yep.
I mean, the thing that's frustrating is the more you're training it, the more you realize. And I hate to say this word, but it is my son calls it non-player characters. The people are
Interesting.
just going through the motions with no real understanding of what they're doing and the consequences to that doing. But we're fortunate. I think me and you and our friends and our colleagues, we are blessed. Like I thought about it last night, this wedding, they were playing music all night from the 80s. And I used to think to myself, what is it so special that everybody wants to listen to the 80s? And you know what it was? It was actually a perfect blend of not too much technology, but enough creativity, you
Mm,
know, and and it was quite it was a joyous time, you know. I know there was difficulties, wars and still and stuff like that, but people were enjoying their life, you know, people were dancing. We weren't relying on these phones to communicate.
hmm.
You know, you picked up the phone and if your friend said, meet me at the bar at 7:15, you were there. And if you didn't show up, they'd wait. They'd wait an hour and no, he's not going to show. Fine. We just crack on, you know. Whereas now it's like people have an excuse to be late. Oh, I'm running behind in traffic. Like text. Ah, that's absolved me from my responsibility because I have texted you. You know, and that's why I left the corporate world was, you know, you could roll up to a meeting and then someone would say, did you read the email I sent you? And I go, what email? Well, I sent you an email before the meeting. Oh, did you? When did you send it? Oh, you sent it to me 2 minutes before the meeting? Oh, yeah, but I sent you the email. You're supposed to have read it before the meeting. I just go, you know what? Fuck off. Fuck right off. Stop trying to manipulate the environment to suit your ego, you
Mm.
know? Um, And so I knew I had to. I mean, obviously before emails, there were memos. I don't know whether you're old enough to remember that, but people would, if you've ever seen the film American Psycho, you know, people get a memo into the in tray. You know, this is the theme of the day. This is what needs to be done. Oh, I just used to go,
Suck it.
yeah, you know, no, I don't need that shit. I didn't need that. Yeah. Did you not get the memo? What memo? You know, the memo in your in tray. I don't know what you're talking about. I
No,
operate to my own memo and it's in here, you know, and it's in here.
yeah,
That's the memo.
yeah. We're coming back to that. That's this work. That's this practice. It's coming back
Yeah,
into the internal mechanisms. The inner technology, I think, is
that's
exactly
it.
what we're here to. And that, that morphic resonance field too, just as a touch point on that, I think to bring us home. I'd love to hear a little bit more about China Universe just for my audience as well, but
Yeah.
in the sense of how there's so much information bouncing around and the system of oppression, influence, control of the mind and attention knows very well how this system works and has spent a
Mm,
lot of money with really smart scientists studying it for a really long time, decades, in fact,
mm,
if not
mm,
centuries, to be able to maintain their system of
mm,
influence and control. But the
mm,
beauty of quantum physics is like that fear bouncing around, like COVID, such a great example of like just this exacerbated amount of fear. And look over here, look at this war, look at this fire, look at this, look
mm,
at that. And I love it's like Buddha's quote, one awakened human is like worth 100,000 NPCs, basically, something of that nature of that quote. And that literally in quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and mathematics is true through the law of entrainment is the more that we are practicing elevating our vibration and tuning our own guitars, our own instruments to be aligned to this higher frequency, the more naturally we're entraining the environment around us to where the Maharishi effect, the monkeys in other parts of the world are starting to naturally, like at the beginning of the podcast before we even started, where you were saying, yeah, this lady, we were fucking just my son's birthday, and this lady randomly shows up on the beach side and starts doing some Qi Gong. And that's like in Ireland, that is like a
mm,
new concept, but the fertile soil of consciousness is elevating
mm,
at such a degree that monkeys are learning how to crack nuts all over the place because
mm,
of people like us getting together, and especially people like us getting together in groups and doing it, and we're
mm.
amplifying that coherent
Yeah.
field and in
Yep.
training spaces around us where the research shows people that are in a community that meditate, crime rate goes down, da da da. Like the field harmonizes around the highest vibration in that
Yeah.
space. And the more we're connecting, and that's the beauty, I think, of like the double-edged sword of polarity is they're like, look over here how bad it is. Meanwhile, we're on this podcast talking about Qi Gong. And I mean,
Mm.
dude, that's mind blowing. If you were to go back 10, 20 years ago, even in certain parts of the world now today, like that's
No.
incredible. You know, whoever watches this that gets the opportunity to learn about Qigong and the innate wisdom of our ancestry located within our DNA that can be expressed through just movement and presence and breath. And, you know, like that, and then the rapid evolution of consciousness that will occur from people like us getting together and having podcasts like this and then
Yeah.
the effect of that on the morphic resonance field and how consciousness then is just going to continue to attune to those higher vibrations. To me,
Sure.
I'm like, we already passed. What's the term? There's a term, I'm blanking on it right now. I love the term though, where it's basically like you already have created when a rocket is going to leave Earth's atmosphere and break the gravitational field, there's escape velocity where
Mm.
it actually already before it even hits and breaks through the gravitational field at like a certain point, like right here, it actually already has generated enough momentum and energy. The
Mm.
momentum and the inertia actually is already going to take it the rest of the way, and then it breaks through, and then it's set. I believe we've already reached escape velocity. I'm getting goosebumps. As a collective, I believe we've already reached an escape velocity, and that's why the cat is backed into the corner and they're pulling out all the last minute tactics because they're like, fuck, we're
No.
losing grip, we're losing
No.
control. And
Yeah.
and we're like, sayonara, motherfuckers. Like we already
Yep.
peace. We're already out. We're already
Yeah.
out because this
A lot of it,
conversation's happening.
a lot of that control mechanism is based on occultism,
Yeah.
and they hold the secrets to the sacred geometry, but they've manipulated it
Yeah,
to
the
their own.
gatekeeper
But they
perspective.
more possibly, I believe, some of these people would have been handed the keys to governing the planet.
Yep.
And along the way, anything with power gets corrupted. Anything with wealth and abundance gets corrupted. Anything that has some, I mean, you see it in the yogic circles where, the
Oh
guru
yeah.
is pulled up for sexual crimes, and it's like, why are you doing this, dude? You've just been given this amazing sacred gift and then you've gone and corrupted it. And I think that's possibly a few people got together and said, hey, guess what we can use this for? And then we'll be always top dogs. And I think that
Yep.
has had a knock-on effect.
Yep.
I do think those breakthrough people, like there's people within the Qigong world that broke through that, literally by going off into the jungle for 2 or 3 years and training with just
Yep.
no contact with humans, just to make that breakthrough
Yep.
so that they can demonstrate what is possible as a human being. Are we prepared to do that? I don't think many of us are prepared to go to that extreme, but we can still have breakthroughs, from 30 years of training. Um, I think, at the moment, because we're learning different methods of teaching, like our approaches to get there, we're learning how to get there faster. And that's what's happening. They're realizing, oh, people are finding a way to be aligned, to be more spiritually aware quicker than relying on religion,
Yep.
quicker
Well
than
said.
relying on some form of doctrine.
Yep.
The self-realized self is way more powerful than the one that's taught how to realize themselves.
Yeah.
And And I think
No
a
need
lot
for a
of the
guru.
doctrines have been know your place. That's where you belong. How dare you be
Hmm.
considered a god? You are not a god. You're subservient to God. But one of my teachers used to say, "Be still and know that you are God."
It's one of my favorite quotes.
And I'm like, whoa, I used to struggle to say that word. But the more and more tactics, war, famine, genocide. It's all propagation of fear, Fear is the mind killer, right? From the film June. Fear is the mind killer. And the highest level of Qigong, Nei Gong, Dao Yin is the mind. The people that, when you've got a monk who's 97 and can fling you 60 feet backwards, he's not using even the physicality anymore. He's using, or she is using her mind to
Yeah.
do that. And the mind is such a powerful tool because it's infinite. It can be in multiple places, multiple destinations,
Hmm.
multiple universes and galaxies all at the same time. And it's inextricably linked to your soul. And I think this is one of the biggest lessons I had is the mind and the soul are linked, where the mind goes, energy flows. So if your mind is very much in building a community, creating health, creating abundance. Obviously, there's always going to be, there has to be a negative offset to
Polarity.
that. You have to be
Yep.
accepting of that,
Yep.
that even within a beautiful community, people are going to fall out and have a
Yeah.
row, and it's
Polarity
just
exists.
it's acceptable. That's an acceptable how would you say it? It's an acceptable level of collateral damage as to sometimes we
Necessary.
don't get on,
I
sometimes
would,
it's necessary, yeah.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
as long as you're not chopping the heads off each other, it's all good, right?
Yeah.
So, in relation to what you're saying, amorphic fields and energy generation, that system that I've put out there, China Universe, it's my interpretation after working with it for 16 years, but I've expanded it to include center-led movement because I'm a big fan of that. So I've taken the form and I've slightly modified it. So even I've taken what I've learned, worked with it. I worked with it long enough. After about 10 years with it, I thought, grow a set of kahunas now and put a bit of extra spice into there and then maybe an extra cherry on top and see
Hmm.
what that brings to the fit to it. And I with Master Wang not being around anymore, I figured, well, there's kind of permission to go for it. And I wasn't quite sure whether to go for it or not. But the reason why I want it out there is it will be lost if it's not passed. It is self-healing tool. It's built for that. I'm not saying it's the best one. It's not for everyone. People who do it love it. Some people who've done it so, it's very similar to what I do already. Great. There probably is a lot of similarities.
Hmm.
I'm not trying to say it's a very niche. A lot of people in this field, they know Bardua Jin, eight brocades. They know, bone washing, bone marrow washing, Qigong. These are all like famous ones that have made it through the net. This one is very niche. It's a modern interpretation of something that was created in the Tang dynasty. And but this teacher had in the West Lake in Hangzhou had 1,500 students a day coming to meet him by the lake. Can you
What?
imagine the morphic resonance of energy that was generated? And they say to this day, when there's a particular part of the West Lake in the park that you can walk through it and you can feel that
I
energy is
bet.
still there.
Oh, I
Yeah.
bet. Especially if you're tuned. I bet. Absolutely. Especially to that system. I bet you walk through there and it's like, wah, wah, wah.
And he said his teacher in the 1970s, like long before, we had all this modern testing, he said to his teacher, what do I do? I can't do 2.5 hours a day. Like nobody's going to do, 200 and whatever movements. He's like, you'll figure it out, but you need to create an energy field. It's like,
Mm,
what? No, you need to go back home to Hangzhou and create an energy field. It's like, how am I going to do that? Like,
mm,
I'm only one person. And then he figured it out. You
mm.
don't have to do it by yourself.
Fuck. That's incredible.
And he said the most incredible thing of it was because I was suffering with really bad migraines, and I said, Sifu, would you treat me for my migraine headaches? He just slapped me on the head. He went, no, go home, train. You train 18 months. If you're still sick, then you let me know. Then you can come and I'll treat you. And it was like 17 months, X amount of days in, and I felt the migraines going. And I was like, okay, this is what this is all about. You do not. The secret is hidden on the inside.
Mm,
And the field of energy that was created with these 1,500 people meant that if you stepped into the field, and even if you only knew the basics of the yang and the yin crane flying and blah, 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 that suddenly your blood pressure would improve, or
mhm, mhm,
just countless anecdotal, no double blind studies, just pure observational data, qualitative data rather than quantitative. And people going, oh, I had this and I had that. And, we could argue placebo effect, but I mean, who cares?
yeah,
They were taking the
yeah.
time to step into the field, do the work. And unfortunately for him, his work got persecuted. It got lumped into another group of people
Mm,
who were practicing Falun Dafa, Falun Gong. And
yeah.
because he was non-registered, he wasn't considered a medical doctor.
Mm,
It was just a reason for the government to shut
mm,
everyone who was, you know, considered non-approved, shut them down. But his students, I'm sure, I know there's people in Malaysia that still practice it. I know from people from the UK still practice it, but I don't see anyone out there doing Chinese universe teaching courses anymore. So, and how I came across it was by accident, but nothing's by accident. But it was in China, bringing students, needing a treatment, headaches, migraines, and then chatting to a foreign student who'd lived there for many years. And he asked me, like, what are your hobbies? What are you into? Maybe he was trying to bring me and show me, like, if you're into dancing, I'll show you how the Chinese do it. And I said, I'm actually into Qi Gong. And the next sentence was, would you like to meet a master? And I went, oh, hell yeah. And that was it. It was like, okay, he's like, meet me here at this time. We have to go early. He lives quite a distance away and he can only take foreign students. And that was it. I mean, the guy had been effectively under house arrest um, for years, but I think the government turned a blind eye to him teaching foreigners because he knew that we would leave the country and have no real geopolitical influence on the state of the thought processes of the mind hive that can sometimes be China.
mm,
Um, and I'm not sure now if his wife left and his son left as well, and he stayed. But yeah, very, very humble man. You go into his house, he'd make you wear slippers and he'd serve you tea. And at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe 4:30, he'd tell, right, training's over, you need to go. Go now, you go. And I'm like, oh, right, okay. Suddenly just there was no warning. It was just like, okay, training stop, you go. And I'd be like, oh, what's going on? Is he, and my friend would say, oh no, his favorite TV program is on now. He wants to watch. So he was actually quite a simple, humble man. And when I met him, he was like 84. And I would say it wouldn't surprise me if he got to 100, before he got very close to 100. And I said to him, seafood, why did you do it? And he said, well, I only started training properly when I was 40. He said, the first few years I was just messing around and doing martial arts and doing a little bit. And he said, but when I got to 40, I realized that I didn't like hospital. I didn't like being in hospital or being sick. And he looked great. I mean, he was a little short dude, squat, like muscular, and he was like he was like reminded me of a jolly little elf, just like this cheeky little elf, and good fun, and he talked about things that a lot of teachers that I met wasn't prepared to talk about, like spiritual energy, third eye energy. He asked me, "Can you see things?" I said, "Well, yeah, kind of, but I think that's something I have." And he goes, "Oh." He says, wait until you start seeing. And I think he was like, oh, you mean like dinosaurs? And he's like, no, like creatures. Like, then your third eye is like really open. So he just was a very comical character. And he wouldn't, he had no qualms letting off a massive fart in the middle of training and then like laughing about it. And just very like not up his own arse in any way whatsoever. Just very, very and he trained in a pair of slacks and a blue. He looked like a blue shirt. He looked like he should be working as a prison officer. You know, he just he has no silks, no. The only thing that I really got that he was high level with that you kind of knew he was who he said he was he'd been subject to a lot of experiments, and his apartment was absolutely covered in calligraphy. And some of those calligraphies were just he'd asked me to run my hands over them without touching them, and just the strangest sensations would happen to me. One of them would push me back, and I'd be pushed back, and he'd just sit there and I'd be like laughing, roaring, this like foreigner being, pushed back across the room by strange calligraphy. Um, and so those were the magical experiences. But I share those in the course later on. In the beginning, I'm just showing the form, the basic form, and then the center-led movement, which I've created. And then I hope to film this summer. I'm planning to film the calligraphy. So I'd love you to be involved in that, the calligraphy. There's a whole sacred water ceremony, which is very Taoist.
Ooh,
And you infuse water with the calligraphy, and there's a
ooh,
whole ceremony. I think Alan Kane is probably the only person in Ireland that has the full system. I taught
yeah,
him the whole thing, but it's just a very beautiful way of sharing sacred water with people. So for
yeah,
me, it's like, wow, these guys were doing homeopathy, long
yeah,
before homeopathy was ever created. And very similar to Matsuro Emoto's work, he blessed the water
yeah, yeah.
and then the molecular structure. And actually, the teacher used to say to me, "We're less water than we used to be," because of, vibration, energy, polarities, LED. I mean, we didn't have LEDs when I was training with him, but you could see all that was coming. And then the food, I mean, the food was already corrupted in China at that point. And yeah, you could see that people are becoming we're becoming more brittle, less fluid, like. But now we're in the age of Aquarius, bring on the water. Why
Hmm.
do you think so many people started sea swimming all of a sudden?
Mm,
The sea holds that much wisdom. It is the
truly,
supercomputer
truly,
of the planet. That's why you live in Maui. You're surrounded by wisdom, right? You're
100%.
surrounded, literally, the ocean
Sun and
is.
ocean, bro. Yep.
Yeah, it's the data bank. For me, my
Yep.
my my vibe is the rivers
Mm,
and mountains. That's why I like going
yeah.
to Canada and all that. Um, but yeah. So I mean, I invite people if they want to. It's not a hard system to learn. They can go to my website, Chi Life Academy, spelled QI, Life, LIFE, Academy, all lowercase. And you just become a member there. I mean, we can throw this out to your inner circle if you want and give them the link, and then we'll give them a nice discount to encourage them. Um, you'll either get something. I know one of your guys is on the inside. Is it Nate?
Yeah, Nate. Yeah,
Yeah. I don't. I mean, he hasn't. I mean, I've reached out to him, but I don't know how he's getting on. But I will reach out to him and see how he is. But
yeah.
it's a system that if you're coming looking for like all singing or bells or dancing, I'm not going to give you that
Hmm.
because that comes that needs to come with time, you
Hmm.
know. And it's not that I'm holding back. I think it's just like, can you just do this? Can you
Yeah.
move, turn, do the form? Can you do the form without much guidance? A little bit. Can you just do it? Can you
Hmm.
just do the consistency? And if you can do the consistency, then great. Like let's explore other things. I mean, for you, it's no problem. Like 8 step was like, yeah, I'm there every day, 20 minutes a day. Like it's just plug and play and go.
Hmm.
And that, I mean, the flying crane, you have that to a T. Like walking crane, it's like that is just you.
Hmm. Hmm.
I taught you that once, and you had it straight away. I was like, okay, yeah, he's done this before in a past life for sure.
I
You know,
still I still incorporate both of those too, by the way. Like and it'll
yeah,
come randomly and I'll just, yep,
yeah,
there it is.
you know,
There it is.
yeah. I'm actually thinking now this year I'd like to film the fire crane form, so it's the complete form of that type of crane
Sick.
movement, and it treats the heart. That's why
Mm.
it's so well loved, and it's a fire form. It's like a perfect.
Mm.
symbolism of the sun and where
Oh,
you are. You know, you
no
live
wonder.
in the sunshine. You know,
No wonder.
yeah. It's this in the China universe system in the old his old logo was there's eight I Ching original Bagua, like
Oh,
so
yeah,
the
yeah.
eight dimensions, but there's one missing. So people who really know it go, oh, that's incorrect. So you're missing a gua. And I said, not really. I said, there's seven, but which one is the eighth? And they said, oh, you're missing heaven. And I said, that's represented by the crane that's in the symbol. So it's
Mm,
telling you that we're working with heaven's energy. A very clever symbol.
mm.
Um, anyway, I digress. I have to now prepare to bring my daughter to her last day of primary school. She's 13, and today's my son's 17th birthday, so
Okay.
we're rounding that off nicely. My
Yeah.
son did a bit of Qi Gong there when we were in the stone circle, and he did some Shaolin, quite tough stances. And I think he got a lot from that. But I never push any of this on my kids. They're just surrounded by it. If they want to have a bit of fun, I make it fun for them.
Yeah.
Don't make it like a serious discipline. So any of you teaching your children, make it, I teach animal forms to kids. They love to be the tiger and the monkey and, the crane or the bear energy, holding the moon. And they love, there's a great fun that can be had with this work.
Yeah.
And the hardest one for me was the monkey when I was training, when I did the certificate training. The monkey was just, yeah, it was a bitch to do. And I realized that a lot of it was where I was at. I wasn't prepared to
Mm,
ground and root myself in the earth.
mm.
And even making the sounds of a monkey was like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
There's 28 adults in a room going, "Hoo, hoo, hoo, hoo." Like I couldn't do it. I was like, and the same teacher was like, come on, it's there. And by day four, I was the most mischievous monkey in the whole group, like nearly leaping off the furniture. Like, where is this coming from? And it's like, it's coming from your childhood, you know.
Yeah, bro.
You were probably suppressed at some level
Yeah.
emotionally at you weren't allowed to be mischievous.
Yeah.
You weren't allowed to be spontaneous. And then so the expression of the work through the animals is a whole another level of training. Um, and it's fabulous for kids. So there are different ways of learning this, but my plan would be to start creating now. And I've talked about this. I know I've been banging on about this for 8 years since you know me and la 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 la. Stop talking, Monteith. Get on with it. But I am getting there. I am. I think it's. Uh, I'm in that safe space where I have a nice website. I have somebody managing things for me, managing the things that I can't manage, and then just film the content and put it out, and just keep putting it out there. And I think we're blessed, that, as you said, we are blessed that technology should be used appropriately, and this is an appropriate way of using it. Not for suppression, but for wisdom. This is a wisdom podcast you're doing here. It's about what's a wise thing to do.
Yeah.
A wise thing is to know that when to use something and when not to use it. You know, the tomato analogy. Treat it as a fruit. It is a fruit. Knowledge says, it's a fruit. It has I can't remember the word, but botanically it's a fruit. But, unless it's a certain kind of tomato, you wouldn't necessarily put it in a fruit salad. It doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
So I'm sure though in Maui though you have some pretty crazy fruit salads. So I'd say tomato for you would go in there, but that's where we're at.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to share that. So the plan is, and you'll see in the next year, there'll be fire crane. I'll start the 101 training that you did, the Qigong instructor training. I'll refilm all of that, revise it, and that's all there for you, John, to jump on board.
Hell yeah.
And just have the content as a library. And that's really what I want to do is create a library.
Yep.
If I get paid to do it, great. If not, it doesn't matter. I know that people will call for me to come eventually, and I've been invited to Bali for the first time ever,
Dope.
going to Bali next year, and there's some collaborations coming in Germany with some of the teachers that I've met. So there are things coming. In my local community, I haven't had anything going for a while. I just don't have space for it at the moment, you know.
Yeah.
So I'd rather be an information sharer, and if collaboration comes from that, then so be it. So if anyone's interested in more on what I do, they know where to find me on Instagram as well, Chi Life Academy. And I'm an ordinary guy who's a dad who has two kids, a dog, a horse, a cat, a fantastic wife that supports me. I'm not necessarily living like some sacred Taoist priest. I'm an ordinary person using the tools to help me navigate. That's and what I try to do is disseminate and make the technology accessible, but know that the wizardry in your life can be in an ordinary house with
Yeah.
family. You don't have to necessarily remove yourself from society.
Yeah.
It's
Makes
something
you
that
make
should
it.
have been in our tribes anyway. You know, if
Yeah.
me and you were living together in a tribe, you go, oh, go to Monteith. He'll do the Gandalf thing with you. Well, put on a bit of weight. Well, go to John. He'll sort out your diet. All right. And then, so you had all these different wizards within your tribe
Yeah.
and you use that within your community. I understand why people isolate themselves. I understand why they do that. They do that. It's a necessary thing. Sometimes people have to do that to gain a certain level of mastery to then be the projector, to be the shining light. But we can affect change a lot faster if we're like a guerrilla warfare team. We're in there, small little units all around the world, all working together for the common good. It'll exponentially. I always think that people like me and you have done this like 1,000 times. Like this is just, you know, and this is just like we don't need to show off. We don't need to be. I mean, I know you probably get a lot more views when you take your shirt off and show your six pack, but sometimes that's a necessary evil to get the buy-in from people. And then when they go and they meet John, they go, actually, he's a real nerd. He's a real like
Yeah.
health and fitness nerdy,
I was going to say
you know.
vice versa too.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
relatability, I think, is actually one of the greatest superpowers that we can utilize because in yoga, there's the ascetic who's the yogi in the cave that's doing the
mm,
crazy stuff, and then there's the householder. And the householder
mm,
is just like you said, the guy that walks the streets like an everyday man and can carry that energy of enlightenment within through the ordinary lifestyle in an embodied and integrated way, but in a relatable way as well. And I'll definitely say that about you of like you're such a great teacher because I remember even when we were in a circle practicing, you make it like when you're like, this is so great for kids. Fuck, it's great for adults because like you said, we're the ones that are repressed. The kids already know how to be kids. The adults are the ones
yeah,
that forgot, they're the ones that need the permission. And you're so good at like giving permission through making it human and the humanity piece of burping and farting and laughing and like,
mm,
oh, that's right. Like, fuck, we're all just humans doing our best and like, let's have
yeah,
some fun along the way. And you do a great job embodying that energy of like, you're not here to prove anything. You're not here to show
yeah.
off to anybody. And that gives everyone else permission to let go of
Mm,
the standard and take off the mask and just let their little kid run around. And that's when actual healing, that's when actual transformation occurs.
sure. Yeah, and blessings to you as well. Um, I think you're definitely inspiration for those people in this point. We call you the Man Bun Brigade in Ireland. You're an inspiration to all man buns out there, but it's needed, because these guys are lost. They're
Yeah.
lost, and they need dragging back into the wisdom piece.
Yep.
Because like if we're to survive the next few years, because it's going to get crazier.
It's
Like
going to
that's
get
not
crazier.
it has like
It's going to
as
get
the light
crazier.
shines brighter, the longer
Yep.
the shadow that is cast, and we need to
Yep.
be ready for that. I
Yep.
mean, to part my parting note on this is last time I was with Orwin, one of my teachers, he would say, He was training with his teacher in Switzerland, and it was roasting hot, and they were all exhausted, and they've been training for years together. And he'd say, "Teacher, why are we doing this? Like, why? What's the point of all this mad, like standing in postures?" And his teacher just smiled and went, "To be ready." And he was like, "Oh." And then so ensued that "to be ready." And
Mm.
so that's all we're doing. We're
Ready
just
to be ready.
getting ready.
Ready to be ready. That's so
Yeah.
great. Yeah, better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. 'Cause people ask me that all the time. Why do you train? Like for
Yeah.
life,
Be
man.
ready.
For the
Yeah, be
vibration.
ready. Yeah.
I train because it feels good. I train because I want to have my vibration at a point. Actually, I have to find this quote now. Um, it's actually I have it right here. I wrote this, gosh, let's see if I can find the date. I wrote this a while ago and I just randomly came across this the other day. Let's see if I can find it quickly. It was about training. The intention of training. I hope I can find it quickly. If I can't, then we'll let it go. But it was so good. It was something like why we train. And it was God, it's right here somewhere. It's like literally to be ready. It's like something I read it the other day and I'm like, oh, fuck. And now you saying that, I'm like, man, that is too good. That's like exactly what it is. It's in one of my notes here. I don't know if I'll be able to find it. But yeah, we train to be ready. That's so good. I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
Spiritual
And it's not like,
fitness, yeah. Training is forging, refining, and tempering the warrior spirit so the vibrations remain high and you are ready and fit to serve and lead when you are called to action.
yeah, it's not a state of readiness. It's not that, hyper responsive. It's just you are ready.
Yeah,
Like
yep,
you embody readiness.
yeah, yeah.
But on that note, I have to
Totally.
go. I have
Yeah,
to
it's
go
my
and be a
pleasure.
dad now.
For anybody listening, Anthony Monteith, QiLifeAcademy.com, China Universe, amazing Qigong teacher, guys. I couldn't recommend him more highly. I've been studying under him for the last 7, 8 years now, and it's a practice that's absolutely changed my life. He's an incredible teacher, an incredible man, a dear friend of mine, and I appreciate the time, brother. And we're gonna get back on soon, do another one of these.
Yeah,
We got more
we need to do
topics
some belly
to
laughs.
cover. We just scratched the surface of some great topics today, so we'll come back for
I
another
yeah,
one
I
soon.
really thank you to you and the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
And you have to start put you have to start growing wings and crane wings and start heading towards Maui, you know.
Yes, sir. Yeah, me as well. Coming to Ireland, we're merging
Yeah,
more and
come on,
more.
we're waiting. We'll have a place here ready to
Yeah.
go.
All right, brother.
Take care,
Love
man.
you to the
Much
family.
love.
I'll see you
Yeah,
soon.
blessings.